Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Regional Services Committee meeting for Wednesday, March 28th. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, and I'm looking for an approval of the agenda. So moved, seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Moving on now to the adoption of the minutes for the first Regional Services Committee meeting minutes of February 28th. Moved. Second.
And Madam Chair, I'd like to have the minutes amended. I'd like to put forward for the consideration of the directors. In front of you, I've prepared an amendment to the minutes, and this is regarding an item on the set of minutes you're dealing with from the previous meeting, where under business arising from the minutes, you'll see on the sheet that I've prepared for you, it says current wording. I've gone back, I've looked at the video. The wording can be improved in that, especially with regard to the motion. So just so everybody who's in the audience and who's watching on the streaming, what I'd like to propose is that the minutes be amended to read, business arising from the minutes. With regard to item R6, report from the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer, re community engagement, drinking water and watershed protection. Director Kuhn advised he has contacted the RDN and confirmed that the RDN budget figures presented during the community engagement meetings were incorrect. In addition, the information provided regarding the tax figures charged by the Comox Valley Regional District were not accurate. It was moved and seconded that a report be prepared addressing the concerns raised by Director Kuhn about incorrect financial information that was presented regarding the proposed drinking water and watershed protection service. Motion carried. That, I've watched the video, that reflects what happened at that meeting. So the minutes should show that.
So in order to that, we need an amendment, and we need to fix these minutes. It's been moved, it's been seconded. Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Next, we go on to the Special Regional Services Committee meeting for March 14th. Approving that. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Director Kuhn.
Yes, in the previous minutes there was a request made that a report be presented by the CAO with regard to the mistakes that happened, and we haven't received that report, and I kind of was looking forward to that because that indirectly has an influence on the decision we're going to make on the staff report that's going to be presented. So I just want to put that out there. Myself, I don't know how far to pursue this. The concern to me is not so much that it was just the figures that were presented with regard to the regional district of Nanaimo. What troubles me a little bit is it all goes into integrity and trust. And when it gets to that, I get kind of sticky, because trust is the base of any relationship. And if we don't have the feeling, or some of us don't have the feeling here, that trust is the utmost, then things start to erode, and that's a bother I have with this whole thing. So I leave it up to the committee here to decide what we're going to do with that. I would like to have more, let's say, assurance or more confidence. At this stage, I'm a little bit left in no man's land there, because I feel that shouldn't have happened, and I would like an explanation as to how it happened.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. If you turn off your mic, and I believe that our CAO, Brian, would respond to that.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. As was now acknowledged during your adoption of your minutes, that issue had been raised. I responded to the to the question when it arose at the previous Regional Services Committee meeting. I have had subsequent discussions with staff. I will again, as I did previously, acknowledge that a mistake was made. The number that was characterized in terms of the cost of the regional district water and watershed protection service was characterized at $5 million per year. That was incorrect. That was an aggregate 10-year budget. It is acknowledged that their budget is $500,000 a year. That was a mistake. It was information taken off of their website. There was also reference made to a tax rate of $50 per 100,000 related to the RDN. That also was incorrect. That was anecdotal information that subsequently was discussed and used during some of our presentations with the public. I don't know for the committee what more I can say other than that mistake was made. We acknowledge that that mistake was made. I think the differentiation is, was that an intentional mistake? And I will tell you right now, no, it was not an intentional mistake. There's nothing to be gained by anybody for making a mistake like that. I share Director Kuhn's concerns around integrity and trust. I take that very personally as a CAO, and I am actually concerned, as all the staff are, with respect to that information. We pride ourselves on attempting to provide the board and the community with the best information. That's what I can tell you. I'm acknowledging that a mistake was made. If the committee is concerned about staff performance and there's an underlying concern, I'm going to strongly recommend to the committee that that be taken into closed session. I don't think it's appropriate to be talking about staff performance issues in an open meeting. So if the committee wants further information or wishes to discuss it further on that basis, then I'm going to recommend to the committee that it be taken to a closed session. But I've had staff investigate. We acknowledge the mistake was made. We acknowledge it was not intentional. There was no agenda for us. We simply provide the work for the board and provide the information for you to make your decisions. And we apologize for that mistake and whatever credibility or lack thereof that it may have caused the process. We apologize for that.
Okay, I have Director Acton and then Director Kuhn.
Thank you. I have to admit that I'm feeling the same way as Director Kuhn with the trust issues, and it's mostly around the community engagement piece where we've gone out to the community and we've given some false information, and what they've reported back to us is that they don't feel like we've had enough consultation and enough information, but meanwhile the small engagement that we did do there were errors in it. So I'm feeling that we're full steam ahead without actually taking that into consideration.
Mr. Crothers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I can just respond. The relevant information in this is our costs. There was some comparative information that was used in relation to the RDN service, and regrettably there was some inaccurate information. The information that has been provided with regard to the costs of this service for the CBRD is accurate. And that is what's at debate. That is what the public will be voting on, and that information is accurate and has been provided by our financial department. It is regrettable that that comparative information was not, but for the sake of moving this initiative forward, if the committee is interested in, I can assure you that the information provided to the committee and the public with regard to the costs of this service for the CBRD is accurate.
I also have Director Day. Oh, Director Kuhn and then Day, sorry.
Yeah, I'm prepared to let this rest now.
Director Day.
Apology accepted. Thank you, Brian.
Director Marsh. Oh, Stone. Director Stone.
I
Get on
think
to
Director
your-
Day said it. It was a mistake that was made. Staff corrected it. I think to start digging into it and creating it as a trust issue and trying to insinuate that it was intentional is not productive. I accept the apology from staff, and I appreciate that the information that we've had regarding our service is accurate. So,
Director Marsh.
So all I would add to the last couple is that the public is still going to have the final say, so I feel comfortable with this. And I was going to be cheeky and start by saying, if I had $1 for every mistake I've made in my 60 years, I'd be pretty rich, but anyway, I didn't do that, but then I guess I did.
Yeah, you did. Okay. Moving on now to the public input period. So we have, the purpose of the public input period is to provide the public with an opportunity to comment on any agenda item before the board, before the committee considers the item. The public input period procedure policy provides a public input period to proceed in a timely fashion. Public input period items cannot include matters which are or have been the subject of a public hearing. So is there anyone from the gallery that wishes to come forward for any public input? Come forward, Tom. What's our timeline? Okay. Good morning. Would you like to turn on your microphone and introduce yourself?
Sure, Tom
And
Rutherford.
3 minutes. We have
Thank
3
you.
minutes in total, I believe, do we?
In total?
15 in total and
Okay,
3.
I'll be quick, thank
There
you.
you
Tom
go.
Rutherford with Cowichan Watershed Board, and I appreciate the opportunity. I would like to speak to the watershed service. 3 really quick points, and maybe I'm stating the obvious, but I think it's worthwhile doing so. First one is water in our watershed is very important. It's important to our communities. It's important to our economy. It's important to our families. There's nothing more important than water. The second point I'd like to make is my understanding of the proposed service is that it embraces a partnership model. And CVRD has quite a history of working with community, and they certainly work with the organization I represent, the Watershed Board. And I'd just like to point out from a fiscal perspective, we receive resources from CVRD, and for every dollar we receive, we leverage almost $5, which we invest in water and watershed services in the CVRD at no cost to the taxpayer. And I just wanted to point out that the model of partnership, which is included in the proposed service, is one that is somewhat unique to the CVRD and is efficient and effective and something I think we should all be really proud of. My third and final point that I'd like to make today is that in this day where we're acknowledging we will have population growth, we're acknowledging that there will be increased demand on finite and precious resources, and we're looking at things through the lens of climate change, where we know there will be extreme pressure on surface water and our aquifers. Status quo is not good enough, right? Doing things the way we've always done them isn't good enough. I'm not saying what we should do, but I'm saying we need to do something, and I think part of that responsibility lies with local government. And I think if we don't, or if you don't take action, the bus is heading over the cliff. The last point I'd make, people of my age, in my 60s, I'm not on that bus. My kids are on that bus, and their kids are on that bus. So I just wanted to make that, that point. Water's very important. Many of us who live in the community look to leadership from people like you, or for leadership. And I just wanted to make those brief points in 3 minutes, and thank you very much for the opportunity to do so.
Thank you, Tom. Is there anyone else in the gallery that wishes to speak?
Hi, good morning. It's Leroy Van Weeren. I'm the president of the Cowichan Lake and River Stewardship Society. I'm also on the Watershed Use Planning Committee. And I'd just like to make a few comments. One is our society has been operating up in the Lake Cowichan area for over 5 years, and part of our work is to do landowner education, and so we go door to door, knocking on people's doors and talking about water, about the lake, and about the environment. And the overwhelming concern has to do with water quality, water levels, keeping things pristine and clean, and those types of things. So water is in the forefront of all the people we talk to as we go around to all the residents of the lake. As Tom mentioned, the lens of climate change does not look very positive, where we get shorter, wetter winters and longer, drier, hotter summers. And that doesn't bode well for the future. And so with that in mind, I think it's really important that, you know, the district understands the water in its own backyard and how to manage it for the next 50 years. And lastly, from a personal perspective, you know, there's always a concern about taxes and about funding. And if I look at, you know, the priority in terms of parks and recreation versus water, water wins to me versus parks and recreation. And you're not going to have parks and recreation without, you know, a quality water system. And so I'll just leave it at that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Leroy. Any others? Okay, we will now move along. And if there are any delegations? Seeing none. Correspondence? Information? And we'll move on to our first report, which is R1, a report from the Manager of Environmental Services, Proposed Water and Watershed Protection Service. Okay. You're number one. Yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
So I'm going to take this presentation. As has been discussed earlier, this is a significant policy decision for this committee, and I want to thank Kate Miller and Hamid Hatami for their work in collaborating and putting this report together. I wanted to bring you back to why we're here and why this report is in front of you, and I wanted to relate back to your corporate strategic plan that was developed in 2015. One of your 5 key focus areas is protection of water resources. The goal listed in the strategic plan is working in partnership with other stakeholders to better understand and protect the region's water resources and promote sustainable water use. Why? Water is essential for everyone and every community. Responsible management and stewardship of our water resources is necessary to protect the quality and quantity of our water and to mitigate the impacts of increasing development, land use practices, and climate change. I think echoing some of the comments that you heard earlier today. That is from your corporate strategic plan. Underneath that, under actions, 4.3 relates to Cowichan Lake water storage and to provide leadership in the development of long-term water supply and drought planning to support necessary community, economic, and ecological needs. And granted, that was in relation to the Cowichan watershed. But one of the key measures out of that was to undertake a process for the creation of a service establishment bylaw as necessary. So that was the genesis of this exercise, was that it was recognized that there were significant issues facing the Cowichan watershed. There were some issues around the funding for the Cowichan Watershed Board, which currently comes from the Environmental Initiatives budget, which is arguably not necessarily the most appropriate area for the funding to be coming from, and granted the board has approved that, but we wanted to make sure that kind of funding was adequately covered off in an appropriate bylaw. So with that background, I want to talk about what's happened to date. So first off, and this just reiterates what I just said, the region is growing rapidly.
With the regional district of Nanaimo, and you said our service is going to be somewhat or very similar. Now, the recommended option is option 2 with roughly $7 per 100,000. That is still vastly in excess of what Nanaimo charges, and there's where I have a really big problem. The Nanaimo Regional District has a population of about 146,000. compared to ours, 86 or whatever we have, or 89. Yet their budget is only $400,000 per annum. And here we're proposing, even with the lower option too, we're proposing a budget of 1.4 million. I've heard comments in the past when we had discussions, and I'm a member of the Watershed Board, and there's a lot of discussion that goes on about this. And I heard comments like, I wrote this down here, we're going to be the leading edge of water sustainability programs. It is things like that that trouble me. There seems to be an effort, certainly in the Watershed Board, from what I observed, and that is we want to shine. We want to portray to everybody that we are doing the best thing, and we are setting a blueprint that everybody can follow. And I've heard that talk several times. And talk like that, it makes you feel good. You feel good, oh man, look at what we are involved in. But it doesn't at all consider the taxpayer. The taxpayer is just taken for granted. It's like, oh, well, you know, we're doing this great project, and, well, yeah, the taxpayer, they'll go for that. And it bothers me because my attitude has always been, why would I want to be a trailblazer making all the mistakes that you necessarily make as being a trailblazer? Why not follow us in second or third position and let someone else blaze the trail and make the mistakes, and we go in and learn from the mistakes and thereby save a bunch of money? So for me, I don't want to be out there shining and bragging about what we have achieved, and it's the program, and I can't see. I act much more in favor of the taxpayer and say, okay, what can we achieve with the least amount of money? And that, the way I see it, is not being done here. And when it comes to a vote, I want to be excluded with Area I.
Director Day.
A whole bunch of things I'd like to say right now, but there's no motion on the floor, so I might get on that list again. With your comment, Mr. Crothers, and I do have another comment to make, but where if we got to the point where Director Dory says the purchase of land here and there, and it'd have to be a sub-regional or a water improvement district, you know, in a case like, say, Cowichan Lake and even Stocking Lake and things like that, where the water flows into the river and it goes all the way out to Crofton and services that area, that's a rather complicated improvement area to distribute funding or receive funding from. So I'm very interested when getting to there, because I'm also very interested, because I think the perfect model for protecting a watershed is the CRD, where they actually own their watershed and they can plan and do things in there, and it's not we don't have to have deal with individual development proposals that are right on the lake shore and try and correct all the issues that have happened in the past. And that leads me down the road to Director Coons. I look around the table here and I see a lot of people my age, and I think we're called baby boomers, and I think we blazed the trail here. And now we're sitting at this table because I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm starting to feel a little in a hurry here to get stuff done and correct some of the stuff we've done in the past, and because we haven't kept up with climate change and things like that. So I'm feeling a little bit rushed to start doing things the right way. I look at everything and every decision I make holistically, not just what's good for me or what's good, and I'm sorry, I'm going to state it here in the public and it's up broadcast, but I have a real hard time having any sympathy for somebody who owns $1 million properties, and probably 2 or 3, and they can't afford $35 a year or something like that, or $100 a year to protect what Mr. Rutherford says. Without water, there is no life. Without water, there is no Crofton Mill. Without water, there's not a lot of things. So you know, it's time we need to start doing something. We talk about, I heard the word fragmented. Yeah, I listened to my friends at the Cowichan Lake and River Stewardship Society talking about they go and knock on doors and do stuff. And they're doing that on their own. And I hear the Cowichan Lake River, or the Cowichan Watershed Society, I mean, they're doing a whole bunch of work, but they're fragmented from us too. We don't get reports back. We don't hear the good work they're doing except for the directors that go there, but I don't get reports back from me to know what the best decision is here today to make. I don't hear from the River Stewardship Society, and I don't have time to join all those societies and be a part of every movement there is. But I've looked at things holistically. I've been at these tables for 10 years now, and I know enough to go around and give my own seminars. And when it comes to public engagement, well, I'm sorry, that's 150 people-ish that are really concerned. We're decision makers. We need to be concerned. We need to dig into the data. We need to look at this holistically, and we need to move forward. This is a chance to establish something, and yes, it will be better. We will blaze a trail because I like to bench myself with the best, not mediocrity, because whenever I go to my house and I start building a shed out of leftover crap around my yard, it usually falls down in 3 years, or the roof leaks. So let's do the best, because I think we can afford it. The taxpayers aren't kicking back. I hear a few people around this table, that's fine. I hope I can convince you to move forward today and start doing the right thing, and let's understand our watershed for 25, 50, or 100 years out, because you know what? Those are the people I'm concerned about. I want to have good, clean water around them. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could
Yes.
just respond. So in terms of issues around land purchase, infrastructure development, it would be very difficult to put a price on that. And I would expect that if we were to contemplate having that kind of activity included in this service, it would be far beyond the reach of the average taxpayer to even comprehend taking this on. So it has to be managed in terms of being strategic, supporting those kinds of decisions, supporting those kinds of investments, whether it be in the Cowichan or the north end of our region. But to include those kinds of investments wouldn't, there's no way that we would probably get the support of the public to take those on, given how varied they are and how expensive they are.
Director Marsh.
Oh, thank you. I hope I can remember everything that came up as we went around. I just want to start by saying what Mr. Rutherford said at the beginning about the bus going over the cliff, but we're not going to be on that bus, has really stuck with me. The other thing I want to say, I think that maybe, like me, directors have had trouble reading the whole package because of the new live thing. I wasn't able to, I didn't know how you scrolled, so it's only just now that I was able to read the report on parcel tax. And I've gotten more information about why I don't agree with that. My first, on my own feeling about it was, I feel weird that I have benefited by several $100,000 because we commodify homes. And so I think that's true of anyone who's owned a home in the last 5 years here. But if we were to do a parcel tax, and the report actually shows this, the crossover time for where you're paying more is if your house is assessed at $476,000. So you're paying more under parcel tax than the people who have millions and millions of dollars of homes. And the other thing that I didn't realize that I learned from this report was a parcel tax goes on a parcel across all 8 classes. So that means, I assume, industry like Catalyst is paying whatever the number is, rather than a fair share of what they're assessed at. That seems ludicrous to me, because it seems to me that industry is one of the biggest reasons why we need to have this protection thing. I mean, people and what we're doing are, but if you think of sewer as an industry in a way, all of the things, you know, that's why we're in a mess, I think. So it seems kind of ludicrous that we'd say to people who are owning homes under that 476 threshold, they're likely the young parents who are trying to pay for daycare, which we know is the second biggest cost after a mortgage, who are trying to pay for the gasoline to get back and forth to work if they are working because they can't afford an electric car yet. It just seems like I don't know why we'd even consider doing that when we have, for those younger families at that level, or no matter what their property's worth, if you have children under 18 and under, you can defer your taxes. If you are actually 55, I don't know if it's different in the CVRD, the report says 60, but I understand at 55 you can begin to defer your taxes. So in a system, a capitalist system that commodifies our homes, so, you know, if people can't afford to protect the water for their children and grandchildren, well then defer their taxes, because they're going, the way this market's growing, they're still going to be way ahead on the backs of the children and the young people that are coming after us. So we've been at this almost 2 hours. I'd like to move option 2 and actually get the debate on, see where people are standing, because we have another important initiative before lunch that's coming.
I have a very large speakers list, so we'll wait for that. I mean, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more people, and then we'll consider the,
It's been made and seconded.
well, I was still going down the speakers list and, okay?
I don't think you can deny the director an opportunity to make a motion.
No, she could make the motion. I was just going to go to the speakers list and come back to her for the motion.
I think you have to seek a seconder.
There is a second.
Madam Chair, if I could just jump in before we have a seconder. The motion you see that's printed in front of you is not what is needed. So if you're going to make a motion, I've got the proper wording here. Do not make the motion that's on your agenda.
Is it in order for me to make a motion?
Yes, you can make a motion at any time.
Can I read your
But
motion?
the motion needs,
But the motion, and the reason being, here, I'll just read what I have here. That you'll note that on the agenda, it says that it be recommended to the board. The intent is that the draft bylaw will come back here. So it doesn't need to go to the board, because you're asking staff to bring it back to the committee. So in that case, it would be that a draft drinking water and watershed protection service establishment bylaw be prepared based on option 2 of the Manager Environmental Services March 13th, 2018 report for consideration by the Regional Services Committee.
I'm happy to move that.
okay, it's been moved and seconded.
Point of information,
Yes.
Mr. Barry, is that based upon a referendum or AAP?
That decision doesn't need to be made at this point, because all you're doing right now is you're saying, prepare a bylaw. Later, yes, you will have to address that.
Okay, and, okay,
There's also a second step, because I anticipate a question coming. That's including the stuff that's in option 2 of the report. If this motion were to pass, you then have to deal with a second motion saying who the service participants are, because that is not included in the report. So if this one passes, you will then need to do another motion.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded, the motion that was just read out. And we'll move on now back to the speakers list.
As the mover, I wanted to speak
Sure.
a bit more, because I just covered a little bit. The notion that, because the RDN has a parcel tax, that we should have a parcel tax, as well as the reasons I said I'm against the parcel tax. The RDN, as far as I know, I don't know how many small creeks and stuff they have, but they have the Nanaimo River. We have the Cowichan River, we have the Chemainus River, we have the Coxsila River. They're all pretty substantial rivers. So we've got, and I don't know geographically how much bigger Cowichan is than the regional district of Nanaimo, and maybe somebody could tell me that. But I understand that the municipality of North Cowichan alone is one of the largest municipalities in the whole province. And so I think we have to be careful to not make comparisons that might be apples to oranges. I did have some other things, but gosh, it gets hard for me when we go round and round and round. But I am in favor of this. And I just want to leave, I guess, at this point by saying that what this is doing is getting a report. And if the board decides to go to the people, it's the people that are going to, they have to give us assent to do it anyway. And I think that everyone has the right to clean water, and I think everyone has the right to say if they want us to do something about it. And that only way that we're going to give them that right is if we move this process forward.
I'll just briefly say that Nanaimo is creeks, streams, rivers, even the water runoff. They're dealing with all of that in the
Yeah.
workshop that I went to.
Yeah, and with respect, Madam Chair, we also have creeks, streams, rivers, and
Exactly.
lakes. So
Yeah, so they were using volunteers and that. So I'm going to Director Stone.
Okay. So I just want a long list because
Yeah,
we've been going around for a while. I just want to comment just back on Director Dory's comments around the watershed piece, and I thank staff for weighing in. If a study or some of the work that this function would complete recognized that acquiring watershed lands would be a smart avenue to protect water resources moving forward, then the users of that service area could get together and look at how to do that. But this function would allow us to provide the backup information that would actually allow us to make a case for that to happen. In specific regards to the boundary expansion, that was an opportunity to acquire the lands, not at no cost, at a significantly reduced cost, but it wasn't free. That was a misunderstanding that seemed to be circulating around the communities. But unfortunately, that opportunity wasn't supported much for some of the same, what I feel seems like misinformation that circulates around this table and in the communities about the value of those watershed lands and the security they provide for our water supply versus what a boundary expansion might mean in terms of growth. All of that being said, parcel taxes can be seen as maybe the most regressive forms of taxation. We talk about property taxation being regressive. Parcel taxes are even more so. If somebody who's in a senior in a small home that is struggling to keep up with their taxes and themselves, you add a flat rate parcel tax, it disproportionately affects the value of the, is disproportional to the value of the home. And I would concur with Director Day's comments. If you're having high-end homes, not only do you typically have more square footage and consume more water at that home, but you can likely better afford it than somebody who's in a modest home. So assessment-based taxation makes a lot more sense than a parcel tax, at least from where I sit in my view on parcel taxes. In view of the attendance at the open houses and online, I will say that at the Ladysmith Open House, which was one of the better attended ones, 2 members were there from the Cowichan North Watershed Stewardship Group. There was a member there from the Sportsman Group, and they were assigned by their groups to attend those meetings and represented literally dozens, if not more, specific individuals within our area. So although there were 28 people there, they could have been representing more than 200 and brought the messages from their stewardship groups to that conversation and took the information back to their stewardship groups that they had. And they had some great feedback, especially the Cowichan North Watershed group that looks to model our Cowichan Watershed Board in terms of their ability to provide information and governance. This function also allows us, much like the RDN service, to tap those local groups and their expertise. It allows us to work more closely with groups like Polis and others that are doing that study work out there. And I have no illusions that our staff would want to build out an empire of staff within the CVRD organization rather than tap the professional experience of educational institutions and other groups like Polis. So I think that we can get full value out of the spending that comes within the function to make sure we deliver the highest value back. In terms of in favor of the taxpayer or being trailblazers, if we don't look at water as the most critical issue that we have, we're not doing anything in favor of the taxpayer. We're deferring costs further. And if you've seen the history of local governments, school boards, I don't care what it is, the longer you defer costs, the more it costs everybody in the long run. And the longer we continue to dither on issues around water, the more critical it's going to be and the more expensive it will be for all of those taxpayers that we're here and elected to protect. We're here to improve the lives and maintain the quality of life for the people we represent, and if we don't take it seriously around water, we're not doing our jobs. And when it comes to being trailblazers, I gotta say, Director Day said it best. We compare ourselves against the best, and if we're gonna compare ourselves against the lowest, I think it was either Gil Penalosa or one of the great speakers of the couch in 2050 that said, if you compare yourself, I'm better than those guys, and you're comparing yourself to the bottom of the heap, you're only dragging yourself down. You're not improving the quality of lives or assuring the futures of our children or our grandchildren. This is a really critical issue, and I think that you know, if we get stuck into the details of what the service looks like in particulars at this point, we're not today spending our taxpayers' money if we expect our staff to go into that level of detail without the authorization in the form of a service. Once the service is established, you'll have the guidance of a new board. Many of us may be there, many of us may not. But at those times, they'll have the resources to determine what the best direction is to protect the water resources of everybody that we serve and that they will serve in the future. So we have to understand that once the service is established, those detailed budgets and work plans will come to future boards and they will be able to determine the direction of that service. I can't say enough, and I can't figure out enough words to compel other people around this table to take this issue seriously. But I'm an economic development guy. I put at the front end of this term for our own community in Ladysmith, economic development as the #1 priority because I knew we had to find a way to raise revenues to be able to pay for the costs that are coming. The longer we defer the responsibility we have to address the crisis issues that are going to face us in the next decade, we're being irresponsible. The best thing that we can do now is get in the game, start taking action, and protect the future of everybody that we serve, whether we're here next year or not. It's our responsibility to do that. And I would just, whatever I can to compel or convince any of you to support this initiative, I'm welcome to do it. You can phone me, we can go for coffee, we can spend hours debating this issue. The information is available. The complexities of the issues we face in the Cowichan are not the same as Nanaimo. They may be more complex in some ways or simpler in others, but this allows us to take a leadership position on the future of our community, and I just, once again, wholeheartedly support the initiative.
Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I have to agree, water is the #1 most important issue that we face today, and in the South, we know that better than many. But I'm feeling very unsure about our amount of community engagement that we've done. It doesn't feel like we've done enough. I disagree that 128 people is pretty good and that we've done the best that we can. It's on our strategic plan to engage community more with places of heart. I remember that going out even more than this did. People, we were there at markets. For example, having the one night for all of the South at Kerry Park, if that's expecting the community to come to us. We didn't go to them. If you showed up at Kerry Park on Sunday at 1, you would have hundreds of families there and you could engage the community. So saying that there's apathy or they just trust that we're going to do the right thing or they don't want to know is not where I believe. That's not the information that's in the package that was collected. Some of the themes that I saw were 1/3 of the people wanted more details before going forward. They requested additional engagement. More people preferred a localized approach rather than regional. Many were worried about lack of action because of things like the liquid waste master plan, and then there was no action taken. A lot of them were looking for equitable, how is this going to be equitable within the region? And then the theme of misunderstanding was large, including parts of it for myself. And I even had an electrical engineer who worked for NASA call me and say he had no idea what that presentation was about. So I think we could have done better, and some of my questions are, could we do better? Has the public been heard? Because of all those statements, are they incorporated in what we're proposing? And what is the harm of doing a better job at communicating out before moving forward?
So, Madam Chair, I'll take a stab at just in general. There will be a robust, at the call of this committee and the board, engagement process as we move forward into a potential referendum. I would assume that it would be the goal of this board that all its electors have a good understanding of what this service is intended to accomplish, how much it's going to cost, what its purposes are. The engagement that we've done to date, I will say, is far in excess of what we've ever done in the past in creating a service. I think, as everybody that sits around this table knows, staff would work upstairs and develop a draft bylaw. It would come to the board for some deliberation and consideration, and it would go out to an AEP. And the first time generally the general public would see about it is when it was posted as a newspaper ad to either vote for it or vote it down. We've been at this for over a year. We went out, we consulted with the community around what they thought local government should be doing. We went back out and said, we heard you, this is what we're proposing, how do you feel about it? Granted, we only got 138 at our meetings. That was the scale of consultation that we were able to do, but at the end of the day, everybody's going to have an opportunity to have a say on this moving forward. And I would expect that the board will be providing an appropriate budget for us to go out and communicate with the electorate at large for them to understand what the implications of this service are. And so that when they vote on October 20th, they'll make an informed decision as to whether they support it or they don't. We could, and in short answer, we can always do more. You know, there is a capacity. And you know, with engagement comes capacity. I mean, it was a grueling month of February to do what we did in terms of being at 4 public meetings, being at every municipal council, in addition to all the stuff that staff are working on. You know, if we're going to have to employ some assistance moving forward, because we will not have the capacity to do that kind of intensive public engagement unless there's some support to do that, and you'll be faced with that decision in the next couple of months.
Okay, so there is a 60-day formal engagement that needs to happen in the timeline as well.
Sure, it's good to meet the minimum, but I think if this is, we can think outside of the box. No, but this last round.
Okay, we go.
Anyway.
Do you want a follow-up? Okay, Director Nicholson.
Thank you. So, I strongly, this is why I ran, was ensuring we protect our water. So I absolutely strongly support us getting into doing, pulling our weight and being much more responsible in all that we do with respect to water. And I am really comfortable with option 2. I'm pleased that we've stepped back from the big full-scale thing, because I think it's super important that we get it right. And this is a huge opportunity if residents go along with this notion. We have a huge opportunity, but we also have a huge challenge as far as how we do business. We really need to shift to a new way of doing business, and I think that if we're going to move forward with this, we need to start that shift today. And it speaks, I think, somewhat to the engagement process. This is not about the CVRD leading the way. Every single person in our whole community has a responsibility about water. And jurisdictionally, it's spread all over the place, responsibilities. So we have to work truly in partnership, and that means collaborating. Collaborating means you don't have power and control over everything. You collaborate with people, you integrate with what's going on, you maximize your dollars that way. We have some fabulous stuff going on in the community already, so we need to get out and work and integrate with those community efforts and integrate with where we can have the biggest influence, which of course, from a local government perspective, is on land use. And so Mr. Carruthers has mentioned several times that we haven't worked out the details, and I think that there's a lot of work to do to work out the details. So I'm comfortable with option 2. I would really like us to work out the details with the community, and so that when we go forward to a referendum, we are very clear about what we're asking for and what the community will receive as a result of that, as far as the CVRD's role. And so my question to Mr. Carruthers is, how are we going to do that part? Like, I'm looking for something different in the way we approach this, moving to the referendum, because I really want it to succeed, and I really want, in the future, when we succeed, for us to do it differently and well, because that's the only way it's going to work, from my perspective.
So through the chair, I think there's 2 parts to that question. One is leading up to the referendum, and I will be recommending to the board that we engage the services of someone to assist us with that, because I agree we need to do a good job of getting out to the community and making them aware of this. Moving forward beyond the referendum, and supposing that the electorate approves the service, You're right, that's a challenge that we have in terms of how do we engage and collaborate with our partners in the community. We have tended, as local government, to own the services that we deliver and deliver them on our own, and there has been, I've noticed a shift in the 4 years that I've been here in collaboration and utilizing and benefiting and respecting the input that we have from others in the community that are doing that work. And this service will allow us to do that. This service will allow us to support those entities that are out doing that work. I think what's really important, though, to be clear on is in terms of monitoring, in terms of gathering data, it's really important that it be done consistently and properly so that the benefit of all, so we benefit from all of that data that's gathered. So we have lots of people out doing work in the community, and it's important that we are able to coordinate that and ensure that the standards of data collection are maintained so that that information can be used for decision making, can be integrated with the provincial database, all of those kinds of things. That's the role that we play as the regional district in providing that consistency. I would envision moving forward for this particular service similar to what they do at the RDN, where they have an advisory committee. They have a group of individuals that come together on a quarterly basis comprised of our provincial partners, our First Nations partners, our municipal partners that are involved in water protection and provide advice and guidance to the board with respect to work plans, with respect to where the issues are in the regional district that need to be addressed. This whole service is based on partnership. It's a fundamental principle of this service is it's empowering partnership, and it's important. I don't have through the chair for Director Nichols, I don't have the answer to exactly how we're going to do that. I do know that it's important to this board, and that's something that we're going to have to make sure that we achieve if this service is approved.
Follow-up?
Is there an opportunity for us to have a further conversation about this particular point? I don't think we'd necessarily need to deal with it right now, but I'm not comfortable with your response. I don't think it goes far enough, so I would like to follow up with that, and I'm not quite sure how to do that.
Well, we're going to be coming back to the committee to get direction with respect to a potential referendum and how we go about communicating, and that would be an appropriate time for the board to provide direction to staff as to what they want to achieve in terms of an outreach program. And I'm talking about referendum, not necessarily talking about post, and that would be essentially your new board that's going to be dealing with implementing this service if it's approved on October 20th. So,
right. So I'm just concerned about the next few months.
Yeah. So that would be the appropriate time when we come back, probably to the next Regional Services Committee meeting, when we bring the draft bylaw forward. And at that time, we'll also be talking about communications and how the board wants to be dealing with that moving into a referendum.
Director Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to start by saying that I think it's really important that when we speak around this table that we be cautious of the things that we say and how we say them, and I'll be cautious of that in my remarks as well, because just because we say them doesn't make them truth or fact. And just a couple of examples in relation to this is, Director Kuhn has stated that we don't think about the taxpayer. Well, I don't think Director Kuhn can claim the hallowed ground of being the only one around this table concerned about the taxpayer. And Director Acton thinking that we've just done the minimum on engagement with our communities, I believe is not a fact. And I attended 8 of the sessions that were scheduled to go and engage with the community, and I don't know that anybody else did from around this table. And I heard in all of the regions, or all of this region, what concerns were expressed by people. And yes, we had people say that they don't think that the CVRD should be engaged in this, that it should be left with the province. But you drill down a little bit and you ask a couple of questions, and those same people that don't think the CVRD should be doing it think that the province is doing a terrible job at their responsibilities. So I think there's room for us to take on some of these responsibilities and to do it efficiently and with a financially responsible way of doing it. I think it's clear in the attachment around the parcel tax, that I don't want to consider the parcel tax because it's punitive to those people in lower valued homes. And probably the biggest reason that I want to see the assessment-based approach to this is I want the forest companies to pay towards this service. And on an assessed basis, the private managed forest lands will be contributing to this function. I think that's incredibly important. I think that in regards to our chair's comments about the information put forward by the Nanaimo Regional District, absolutely. I think if this function moves forward and we establish this, that in 10 years' time, we better have a really good online presence and a really good, explainable and understandable pitch that when somebody comes and asks us what this service does, there it is, right there. But we've been in an exploratory phase of getting information from the community. I remember when we were in Kerry Park, someone came up to us and said, I don't understand this because you haven't indicated how many staff people you're hiring and where their offices will be and how many computers you'll need and that sort of thing. How can we vote on something like that? And the response was, the last time we came out with an AAP or referendum question where we had that all figured out, the communities accused us of having this in the can. It was already decided. It was just a formality to talk to the community. When you couch it in that scenario, people go, oh yeah, you're right, we don't want you to have a fully sussed out plan if you're truly asking us for your input. And that's what these sessions were about. This is what's being proposed. Have we got it right? Are we missing anything? Is there anything you'd like to see added? Is there anything you want to see taken out? And as a result, we've got the option that's before us today. I think that when it comes to how do we approach this, who's in, who's out, everybody seemed to agree that if we're going to establish this service, it should be a regional approach. That if we're going to be talking about the Cassidy Aquifer and Shawnigan Lake and Cowichan Lake, and we should have a regional approach. That was a common theme throughout. And when I think about when we met in Ladysmith with Aaron and Mary and some of Mel's people, they wanted to know what will be the benefit to them? How will they receive some of the benefits of the services that this will provide? And I think that the way this is laid out and the work that staff has already done has proven that we can do this service and do it well. And as I said, I like the way the option 2 is, it's scaled back, so we're not going to try and do everything all at once right out of the gate. We're going to be focused on what we're doing. And my last comment is, I ran into a watershed warrior on the front steps of Superstore last weekend. And the thing he said to me is, what is taking the CBRD so long? Get this done. I'll be supporting the resolution. Thank you.
Okay, we have 4 more speakers, Director Lefebvre, Clement, Day, and Davis, and hopefully we can call the question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think option 2 is a very reasonable compromise. I think it reflects being responsive to some of the comments we heard. It will allow us to get started. And I just want to speak quickly to one aspect of it that I think is very important, and that is around land use. And my understanding is now that we may be approving subdivisions which require water, just simple proof that the water is available there now today for that next house. And Director Davis made a comment about Mill Bay and the future of Mill Bay being largely determined by water. And that is really concerning as you consider that many systems may be affected by saltwater intrusion, lower aquifers, If we don't know that and we're approving developments, we're setting the stage for some really drastic stuff in the future. So that's just one aspect of this, but a relatively small investment in monitoring, in learning, in looking at the bigger picture of water quality and quantity can only serve us well. And I just think this is a very reasonable way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Clement is gone. Welcome back. We have Director Day.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The comments about not doing enough yet, I think we're about to launch into, if this does go forward today, a huge endeavor in communicating with the public. And I would think we're going to call upon our community groups to get out there and be a part of it and partners with us in the communications on this. I would think that was gonna happen. That's the feeling I get because the way things have gone so far in my term here. I feel real sorry for people that may opt out if this moves forward. I think after the next election, if you're here, or if somebody else is here, they're going to be regretful that they're not part of it, because I don't know how we divide water amongst ourselves when people don't want to be part of a certain aspect of looking after it. So I don't know how that's going to go down. I think that would divide a board on an issue that we, as a board, sat in a room and identified as a priority. And I've been staring at it for almost 4 years now. And we beat it up, and it always comes to agreement, although there be a few people that disagree, that we're going to move forward. And here we are today, and I hope we can do this together, because I'm going to say it again, water is the most important thing we can ever have to deal with, and we need to keep it fresh. Thank you.
Director Clement.
I'd like to call the question.
Oh, well, I have one more speaker, Director Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, I did, sorry. I have two more speakers. I didn't even.
Point of order. When I call the question, there's a seconder, we require 2/3 majority, then we can vote on it. I think we've all done a lot of talking here, and I think
It doesn't hurt
nothing's being
to
moved.
continue the conversation, because communication is very valuable, and there's only a few speakers left.
I haven't spoken yet.
Yeah,
Several people
and
have
Director
spoken
Davis
several
haven't
times.
spoken.
So, in beginning of this term, staff came to us with a similar full meal deal, and I wasn't supportive of it because it was rather large and unwieldy, and it had all of the desks and computers and details, and it was problematic. And I really liked, we told them to go back to the drawing board, and they have come back with this, and I'm really happy with what's come back, and I certainly like option 2. And the community engagement so far was only to suss out to get to where we are right now. So the community engagement on this function hasn't even really started. So I agree 100% with Directors Stone, Morrison, Lefebvre, and Day, and I really support this.
Director Walker to close, and then we will call the question.
Okay, thank you. I didn't hear in the motion, or maybe we're going to have a second motion. I didn't hear in the motion, but I did hear during the discussion, at least a couple directors said they wanted either a portion or their area to opt out.
That's not in this
So I
motion.
guess my question is who's in? Are we all in? Can you opt out, and which areas will vote on it? So will every electoral area and every municipality have a vote if this passes and we go to referendum?
Madam Chair, through to the committee, if this passes, you will then have to decide who the partners are, because I cannot draft a bylaw without knowing who the partners are. So that's, if we get a yes here, we then have to set up or decide who's in.
Just one comment, it makes it a little difficult to vote if you're not sure who's in and who's out, but we'll see where that goes.
Okay. So would you like to read the question? Just read the.
Yes, Madam
Please.
Chair. That a draft.
It's been a while.
That a draft drinking water and watershed protection service establishment bylaw be prepared based on option 2 of the Manager Environmental Services March 13th, 2018 report for consideration by the Regional Services Committee.
All in favor? Oh. Do you do it? Oh, after, are you, okay. Let's just start again. Okay.
I wanted to ask a question to that, what Mr. Berry said about opting out.
Oh, but that'll come. After. That'll come after. So the question is now to prepare the bylaw with this. This is the question for this one. And then the next question is who is in that bylaw. Am I correct?
Yep.
All in favor? Opposed?
So 1, 2, 3, 4. Because we have 14 people here, you would need 7 to defeat. There's only 4, so it carries. 4 opposed, so it carries.
Moving on now to. Can I ask my question? Yes.
So, Madam Chair, when, in the past, whenever we've considered a regional service, we've laid out the groundwork. We know how much money the bylaw is to include, because that was included in the report. But as part of it, we've always just had to have your decision, who's in the service and who's out. The typical motion that is put forward, based on past times when we've dealt with regional bylaws, that the participating areas in the drinking water and watershed protection include all 9 electoral areas and 4 member municipalities.
Director Stone.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded.
That the participating areas in the drinking water and watershed protection service include all 9 electoral areas and 4 member municipalities.
Director Kuhn.
I'd like Area I to be excluded.
The motion on the floor is that they are all included. Director Marsh.
This is the first time I've participated in something we're doing where someone can not be included. So I don't know if you can not be included just because you don't want to, or is it a majority of the board? Okay, so I would like to speak in favor of the motion. To me, this is a justice issue for the planet, but also for all of the payers. Everyone in this regional district is going to benefit from this work, so everyone should pay towards it. It's clearly the most regional thing aside from the airshed that I've ever sat here and talked about. So, gosh, and to, you know, we're asking to get an engagement process to see if the board decides they're going to go and ask the people. To opt out at this point, to me, seems really disrespectful to the people of North Cowichan. If I was to say, oh, I don't want to participate, we're going to pay more because we have more population than anybody else. To me, that seems really disrespectful. And I would ask you all to consider that, what are you saying to your electors by saying we don't even want you to have a chance to say if you want to be a part of this? There's things that I do with my finances that make me feel good. It's part of what makes it good to be alive. I don't think we should be trying to deprive anybody in Cowichan from the right to say, I want in or I want out by their vote.
I'd just like to say that a director could amend the motion if they wanted in or out. So I'm moving on now to Director Acton. Then I have
Thank you.
Day.
I was not
Stone.
completely prepared for this question. So my question is, and I don't know how the process will completely unfold later. So during this referendum, So I hear what Director Marsh is saying, and I do consider myself to be here to make regional decisions, but I do represent the community's interests in Shawnee and Lake, how they would make decisions regionally. So if this referendum, let's say everywhere else, people are for it, but in Shawnigan, say only 20% are for it. So therefore, they would want to localize their own watershed protection and management. Am I able to opt out later? Or is Area B able to opt out later?
Mr. Derry?
Madam Chair, I've heard a number of things this morning that there seems to be, clarity is needed. So let me just start and backtrack, and I'll get to answering your question here. I've heard things about communication, et cetera, and community engagement. On the next report that Mr. Kieber has about the affordable housing, there is a chart there for timelines for seeking public approval. If you approve this today, there's going to be a draft bylaw. It's going to come back at your next Regional Services Committee. You're going to decide whether or not to give it first 3 readings. If you do, you then enter into a 60-day formal community engagement process. And that's for you to obtain the opinion of the people in the community. On August the 8th, you will decide, based on that opinion, are we going to go forward or not? So we're not talking about a referendum right now. At that time, if you feel that you want to go forward, you will need to set a question, decide the question that's going to be asked on the ballot. It's going to be something along the lines, do you support the adoption of bylaw 1, 2, 3, 4? But at that point, you have to decide, is the vote going to be counted as a whole or separate areas? It takes 2/3 of the votes cast to do it over the entire regional district. You'll recall, for those of you who were here, back in 2014, the Cowichan Sportsplex. It came forward, and at that time, the board decided to go separate areas. So that's going to be a decision of the board on August the 8th, whether or not the vote will be counted for Shawnigan by itself and everybody by themselves, or everybody as a whole.
Director Day?
Yes, I'm wondering if there's a staff member that could help me understand if we move forward here, and I still would feel badly for anybody that opts out. What would happen for an area that opts out, for instance, Shawnigan, and they run into some water issues and they're not part of this and they need some help? How do they fund any work that needs to be done? Or say for Area I or Cowichan Bay, how will they resolve their issues with drinking water if they're not part of this?
Madam Chair, I'll take a stab at that. In the case of, for example, Shawnigan, who have a South Cowichan Water Study Service, there would be some limited capacity to deal with that. But that is the challenge of individual municipalities or electoral areas opting out of a service of this nature. It's hard to dissect this service into geographic electoral area by electoral area basis. Water and watersheds don't have those boundaries, so it would be very difficult to remove a particular jurisdiction, but in the jurisdictions are drawing from common aquifers. We have Saltair, parts of Area H and Ladysmith drawing from a common water source in the north. We have a number of improvement districts and electoral areas drawing from a common aquifer. If one of those electoral areas opts out, makes it very difficult and challenging for the other jurisdictions to be paying for the work that would be required to deal with that. That's why these issues with a watershed-based service are very difficult to do on a jurisdiction-by-jurisdiction basis.
Follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Crothers, and that's what I mean. This has to be considered holistically. What happens in the sky, what happens with the climate, what happens in Lake Cowichan, what happens in Stalking Lake, all affects everybody in the regional district. The water you drink today doesn't just drop where you need it, when you want it, And I don't think there's anybody in this room that can guarantee if they're doing underground water sources right now, that it's gonna be there 25 years and be healthy with the way we do business now.
Director Stone.
I'll pass.
Kuhn, Director Kuhn. Did I see any more? Did you want? Oh, sorry.
Yes, we might have a chance at the time of the referendum, but by that time we'll have traveled down this road far too long, and we still will be faced with the same decision, and that is, unless we have localized referendi, most likely it'll be a regional referendum. So at that point, no matter what happens, everybody's in. So it's, unless you get a majority to vote against it, of the total population, which probably is unlikely. So we're going to face the same situation. And I've given this a lot of thought. I don't like what's being done with this whole water program. I don't like the whole, let's say, qualified, yet they achieve the same kind of thing, and I don't see why we can't do that. So I would like to modify that motion.
You have an amendment?
An amendment, yes.
Is there
I'd
a
like to.
seconder for the amendment? Well, he's gonna make the amendment. Oh, make it, but I kind of knew it was.
The amendment would be
I'm ahead
that
of myself.
that my area would be taken out, and Duncan would be taken out.
Oh, and Saltaire.
And Saltaire would be taken out.
Your motion is Area I, City of Duncan, Saltaire. Is there a seconder for that and? I'd also like to, just a second, consider that as well, because I really would like to see that we work on a different pattern with this. So I would like to have Area D as well in that. So we have Area D, City of Duncan, Area I, and Saltaire. Is there a seconder? There's been a seconder. Okay, so on the amendment, Director Stone.
Well, I'm shocked that Saltaire would want to be out of it when Director Dory just spoke to the critical issues around Stocking Lake's watershed. Ladysmith has carried the burden to try and secure that watershed on behalf of both of our communities for a long time, but I can absolutely guarantee you that as we move forward on helping Saltaire address their water issues, that would create a lot of complication for Saltaire. I'm just very surprised that Director Dory would not only support that motion, but to remove Saltaire from such a critical service when the water issues that Saltaire is going to see on the horizon, especially in regards to the management of the watershed and the lands that aren't secured around Stocking Lake. It's really surprising to me, but I would definitely be voting against this amendment. And I think that it's been said already, but I'll say it again. If we sit around this table with our regional hat on and don't step up to support all of the people that live within the regional district, including those in Yubo, the City of Duncan, Saltaire, and Cowichan Bay, that's crazy. Excuse me.
Is there going to be any end to this sales job here?
No, Director Kuhn, we've had to listen to you with your bias about taxes for over a year.
Director Stone, just finish with
I
your
have the
conversation.
mic,
Okay,
thank you.
Yes.
So if you want to end the sales pitch, why don't you start respecting your taxpayers by not taking vacations on their dime and focus on the water issues that are going to be very present for them?
Make it a personal issue when we're talking about an amendment. So we have an amendment on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion, Director Stone?
Go with this.
Oh, I have Morrison and Dory. And Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I'm looking at our placemat, our corporate strategic plan. I'm looking back over this this year or this term. I think of the great talk and the effort put into this corporate strategic plan, and yet.
But that we shouldn't be punished because we have a different philosophy.
So that's where I'm coming from on the Stalking Lake thing. Thank you.
Three more speakers on the amendment, Director Acton, Davis, and Kuhn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to say that I value everybody's opinion at this table, and I think that we all share that. And I also think that whether we agree or not, we do respect each other's opinion, and we have been a very functioning board, and I noticed that right from the get-go when I joined this board. It's turning into a little bit of a gong show right now. And I think it's because there's some fear and some misunderstanding, and I would like to see a suggestion of how to move towards more of a unified approach so that we could address some of those things with some real facts and some real understanding and perhaps some more conversation instead of some attacks or not respecting people's opinion. And I don't feel comfortable right now forcing the hands of 4 directors who feel like they do not want to belong in this, in this referendum or in this vote. So I will be supporting them, but I would rather hear some suggestions of how we can further discuss this and get rid of some of that fear.
Director Davis.
Thank you. The 3 jurisdictions along the Cowichan River would want to opt out of this just boggles my mind. Like, the millions of dollars of regional money that has been spent on the Cowichan system over the years that we've all paid into, and
There have been comments made by some people indicating that that if a water system is in trouble, that some of this money could be used for that. I think there's a big misunderstanding here. First of all, we cannot pool water systems.
When I think of everything holistically, I also mean, yeah, this is not a function to replace your pipes, to put a chlorination system in or whatever is needed in the future. This is about start looking at water and fresh water supply for now and for the years to come, starting in the sky. Things are changing. Our environmental people know that. They're studying it. We've been here talking about this for 4 years. I've been talking about this for over 4 years. For those that don't have enough information, it's been laid out for us. Yeah. We can't get to an agreement here. It's obvious to me that a vote at this table, if the same amount of people vote yes or against this as they voted for the last, that the 4 people that want to opt out will be defeated and they'll have no choice. And at the end of the day, it goes to the public. And we're guaranteed it's not special interest. And if it's that big of an issue that the public that you represent are up in arms about it, they will come out to the polls. Statistics will prove we're going to get well over 20%. We'll probably get over 30% turnout of the votes. And if it's that big of an issue in your constituency, you're going to get a 99% turnout then, or a 40% turnout, which is far more than we get at these public engagement sessions. This is a perfect opportunity to get the final answer from the public on this. Thank you.
Hopefully everyone's had a drink of water, ready to go for round 2 here, and we'll move to R2. And who's speaking to that? General Manager of Corporate Service? Anybody? Okay, it's just in front. Nobody's going to be speaking. Okay, so we have R2. There's a report from the General Manager of Corporate Services, the proposed affordable housing service establishment. This is for direction. So Mark is available. Mark is available for questions. Is everybody back now? There's a few missing, but, okay. We have quorum, but.
Did you call it back?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I'm moving on to R2. Report from the General Manager, Corporate Services, proposed affordable housing service establishment.
Kind of direction, if we wanted to move this issue forward, would be recommended by staff.
Who'd like to answer that?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Barry.
Yes, I'll answer that basically, and just revisiting what we did. We need direction to prepare a bylaw, who's in, how much, and that's basically it at the end of the day. But Mr. Keeber.
I'm just going to add to that because the bylaw has been prepared. We were asked to prepare a draft bylaw that's prepared and attached to this report. So, and that's regional, everybody in.
What he said, I'll move that.
Oh.
I would move that the bylaw as presented in the staff report be
Forwarded to the board.
forwarded to the board for consideration.